I inherited a neglected beach cabin from my wife while my son received the villa in Italy. He sneered, "Go live with the rats," and forced me out. I drove there simply needing a place to sleep, but when I pushed the door open, I froze at what I found. I'm glad you're here. Follow my story to the end and comment the city you're watching from so I know how far it has reached. I never imagined my own son would look at me with such contempt. Standing in the living room I had called home for 37 years, I watched Douglas flip through the will as if counting lottery tickets, his expression tightening into something I barely recognized when he reached the section about the properties. A beach cabin? His voice cracked with disbelief. Dad gets some rotting shack on the coast, and I get the villa in Tuscany. He let out a harsh laugh that tightened my chest. Perfect. Even in death, Mom knew who deserved what. I stayed silent. There was no point arguing. Jennifer had made her decisions, and apparently I didn't rank highly in her final judgment. The lawyer, Mr. Patterson, cleared his throat from behind his desk. He had known our family for 15 years, watched Douglas grow from a spoiled teenager into a difficult adult, but he remained professional. Your mother left very specific instructions, Patterson said carefully. The cabin property is fully paid off, Robert. No mortgage, no liens. Douglas snorted. Great. Dad can live with the rats and seagulls. He turned toward me, and I saw a cold look I had noticed more often since Jennifer became ill. Hope you enjoy the smell of low tide. My hands tightened without thinking. This wasn't grief speaking. This was Douglas being himself. The same child who used to break my tools and blame the neighbors. Jennifer had always defended him, always offering excuses. He's just expressing himself, she would say. Boys need to find their own way. He had found his way, and it led straight to cruelty. Patterson slid a set of keys across the desk. The cabin is at 127 Driftwood Lane in Clearwater Beach. It's been unoccupied for some time. Unoccupied, Douglas repeated with a laugh. Nice way to say abandoned. I pocketed the keys without looking at them. The metal felt cold in my hand. How long has it been empty? Patterson hesitated. I'm not entirely sure. Mrs. Scott Holloway was very private about that property. Douglas was already gathering his documents and placing them into his briefcase. This has been interesting, but I have a flight to catch. The villa needs an appraisal. He paused at the door and looked back at me with the same expression he'd worn when he was 12, and I caught him taking money from my wallet. You should pack your things, Dad. I'm listing the house next week. The words hit like a physical blow. This is my house too, Douglas. Not anymore. His smile was sharp. Mom left it to me, along with everything that matters. You have 48 hours. The door closed behind him, and the house suddenly felt large and empty. Patterson packed his briefcase, avoiding my eyes. I understood. My wife of 35 years had died 6 months ago, and my son was throwing me out. The house where I had raised him, repaired every faucet, painted every wall, and held Jennifer through her final illness was no longer mine. That night, I sat in the living room surrounded by boxes. Douglas had already arranged movers for the next morning, and they would take everything that belonged to him, which apparently included everything Jennifer valued. The china, the antique furniture from her mother, even the family photographs. I picked up one picture that had slipped from a box, our wedding day. Jennifer in white, me in a rented tuxedo, both smiling as if we had won the lottery. She looked young and happy. When had that changed? When had I become someone she could leave behind so easily? My phone buzzed. A message from Douglas. Movers come at 8 a.m. Don't get in their way. I turned off the phone and went to bed in my house for the last time. The next morning, I loaded my pickup with what was truly mine, clothes, tools, and a few books Jennifer never cared for. The movers barely noticed me as they carried out 37 years of my life. One almost took my toolbox until I explained it wasn't on their list. By noon, the house was empty, except for me and my truck keys. I sat in the driveway with the engine running, looking at the place where I expected to grow old. The roses Jennifer planted were beginning to bloom. I had fertilized them just last week, as I had every spring for 15 years. Someone else would enjoy them now. The drive to Clearwater Beach took 2 hours. I had never been to this area and hadn't even known Jennifer owned property there. How long had she kept this from me, and why give it to me if it was as worthless as Douglas believed? Driftwood Lane was a narrow, sandy road that ended at the beach. The houses were a mix of older cottages and newer construction. Some looked like expensive retreats, others abandoned. Number 127 clearly fell into the second group. I parked in front of what might once have been a driveway, now covered with sand and weeds. The cabin looked worn from years of salt air. The blue paint was faded and peeling. The porch sagged, and several windows were boarded. This was what Jennifer left me. But as I sat there, something didn't add up. Jennifer had been careful with money and thoughtful with decisions. She wouldn't keep a useless property for years without reason. I took my toolbox and walked to the door. The key Patterson gave me was old but turned easily in the lock, too easily for a place supposedly untouched for years. The door opened quietly, and immediately I knew this wasn't what I expected. The first thing I noticed wasn't decay, it was lavender, faint but clear like recently burned candles. I stood in the doorway trying to understand what I was seeing. Inside, the cabin was far cleaner than the exterior suggested. The furniture was old but dust-free. A blue throw rested neatly over a faded couch, and fresh, slightly wilted flowers sat in a jar on the table. Someone had been living here. I set my toolbox down carefully. The wooden floors creaked but were clean. In the small kitchen, dishes were drying beside the sink. 2 plates, 2 cups, silverware arranged neatly. My mouth went dry. Who had Jennifer allowed to live here? The refrigerator was running. Inside was a half-gallon of milk expired 3 days earlier, leftover soup, and several medications. The name on the bottles wasn't familiar. Sarah Chen. The prescriptions were recent, some from the previous week, and the address listed was this cabin. Sarah Chen had been living here, but where was she now? The living room offered more answers. A stack of mail sat on a side table, bills and medical letters addressed to Sarah Chen at this address. Mixed among them were envelopes for Jennifer Holloway. My hands shook as I opened one. It was from her oncologist, dated 2 months before she died, an appointment she had never told me about. Jennifer had been coming here regularly. I sat on the couch trying to process it. My wife of 35 years had maintained a hidden life in this cabin, receiving medical care I knew nothing about, and sharing the space with someone named Sarah Chen. A photo album lay on the table. On the first page was Jennifer, smiling in a way I hadn't seen in years. She sat on the beach outside this cabin, her arm around a younger woman with dark hair and kind eyes. They looked relaxed and comfortable. Other photos showed them cooking together, walking along the shore, reading on the porch. In each image, Jennifer appeared calm and peaceful, like the woman I met long ago before life and constant pressure wore her down. There were also photos of Sarah alone. She seemed to be in her 30s and moved carefully. In several pictures, she used a walker or wheelchair with medical equipment visible nearby. Jennifer had been caring for her. The discovery tightened my throat. Why would she keep something like this secret? Then I heard footsteps on the porch. I froze, the album still open in my hands. The door handle turned slowly, and a key slid into the lock from the outside. Someone else had access to the cabin. Sarah Chen, the woman from the photographs, opened the door and stepped inside. She was smaller than she appeared in the pictures and moved carefully using forearm crutches. Her dark hair was tied back in a simple ponytail, and she wore medical scrubs as if she had just come from an appointment. At first, she didn't notice me. She was focused on getting through the doorway with a bag of groceries. "Jenny," she called softly, "I got those crackers you wanted. The doctor said your appetite might." She looked up and saw me sitting on the couch. We stared at each other for several seconds. Her expression shifted from surprise to confusion, then to recognition. "You're Robert," she said finally. It wasn't a question. I nodded, unable to speak. How did she know me? Sarah placed the groceries down and moved to the chair across from me, settling carefully and keeping her crutches within reach. "She thought you might come here eventually?" "She," I asked, though I already knew. "Jenny, your wife." Her voice was calm and gentle. "She talked about you often." I found my voice. "I don't understand. Who are you? Why were you living with my wife?" Sarah gave a small, sad smile. "I wasn't living with her. She was visiting me. This is my home, Robert. Jenny bought it for me 3 years ago." The room seemed to tilt. Jennifer had purchased a property for someone else. "That's impossible," I said. "We never had that kind of money. She used her inheritance from her mother. Sarah replied. The money she told you she donated to charity. Her tone was kind but direct. She wanted you to know the truth eventually, but she was afraid. Afraid of what? Sarah reached for a manila envelope on the side table. Afraid of how you would react when you learned I was her daughter. The words hit hard. I gripped the arms of the couch. That's not possible. Jennifer never had any children before Douglas. Yes, she did. Sarah opened the envelope and showed me a birth certificate. She had me when she was 17. Her parents forced her to give me up for adoption. I stared at the document. Sarah Chen, born Sarah Jennifer Holloway, mother Jennifer Marie Holloway, father unknown. She found me 2 years before she got sick, Sarah continued. She hired a private investigator. She had been searching for me for decades. My thoughts raced. Jennifer had a daughter she had hidden for 3 years. Why didn't she tell me? I asked quietly. Sarah's expression softened further. Because of Douglas. She was afraid he would make things difficult for me. And she was ashamed of giving me up, of lying about the money, of keeping secrets. She said you were a good man who deserved better than a marriage built around so many hidden truths. I looked around the cabin again. This wasn't a private escape. This was where Jennifer came to reconnect with the daughter she had lost and to make up for years of absence in whatever time she had left. Sarah watched me carefully. She left something for you. She asked me to give it to you if you ever came. She reached behind the couch and handed me a wooden box I had made in high school. I had given it to Jennifer when we first started dating and hadn't seen it in years. I assumed it was long gone. She kept it all this time, Sarah said quietly. She said it was the most important thing she owned because you made it when you still believed in forever. Inside were dozens of letters addressed to me in Jennifer's handwriting. The top one was dated 2 weeks before her death. My hands shook as I opened it. My dearest Robert, if you are reading this, then you have met Sarah and know the truth I was too afraid to tell you while I was alive. I have much to explain and apologize for. But first, you need to know about Douglas. I looked up at Sarah, noticing how much her eyes resembled Jennifer's. What about Douglas? I read the letter several times before the meaning settled in. My hands trembled as I held the paper that would change everything I believed about my family. Sarah sat quietly, allowing me time. She wrote this for you, she said softly. She spent weeks making sure she explained everything clearly. I continued reading. Douglas is in serious financial trouble, though he doesn't fully realize it yet. 3 months ago, he took a large loan against the villa in Italy using forged documents that made it appear I had co-signed. He owes $850,000 to a private lending company, and the payment was due last week. My stomach dropped. I read the number again, hoping I was mistaken. The villa is not worth enough to cover the debt. When the lenders discover the fraud, Douglas will face criminal charges. I learned about it when the bank contacted me to confirm the loan. That is when I hired a private investigator. I set the letter down briefly. Douglas had committed fraud. The same son who had just forced me out was facing criminal consequences, and Jennifer had known before she died. There's more, Sarah said gently, about her medical treatment. I picked up the letter again. I have been coming to the cabin not only to spend time with Sarah, but also because I was receiving experimental cancer treatment at the medical center here in Clearwater. The cancer returned 2 years ago, more aggressive than before. I didn't tell you because I couldn't bear to put you through that pain again. My vision blurred. Jennifer had been fighting cancer alone while I believed her appointments were routine. She didn't want you to see her suffer, Sarah said quietly. I remembered her first battle with cancer years earlier, the treatments, the weakness, the nights of fear. We had endured that together. She should have told me, I said. She wanted to, Sarah replied. But Douglas demanded more and more from her, and she was exhausted. She said it was easier to come here, where she could rest and spend time with me without pretending to be strong. I continued reading. Sarah has a degenerative muscle condition that requires ongoing care. Her insurance does not cover everything, and she cannot work full-time. I have been helping with her medical expenses and arranged for her to receive an inheritance when I pass. I looked at Sarah more closely, noticing the careful way she held herself and the slight tremor in her hands. What condition? I asked. Muscular dystrophy, she answered. Progressive. I was diagnosed at 25. My adoptive parents helped until they died in an accident 5 years ago. Jenny found me just before I lost my apartment. Jennifer had been quietly supporting her daughter while our son was destroying his own future. The letter continued. Every dollar I spent on Sarah came from my mother's inheritance. I never used our joint accounts or your retirement funds, but Douglas did. The investigator found evidence that he had been forging my signature on withdrawals for months. My hands tightened. How much? I asked. Sarah opened another folder. $43,000 from your retirement. $27,000 from your savings. He took small amounts each time so you wouldn't notice. $70,000, money I had saved over decades. Sarah gestured to the box. There are bank records and copies of the forged documents. Everything the investigator found. I went through the papers. Transaction after transaction carried my name but not my handwriting. Douglas had practiced my signature well enough to drain my savings without raising suspicion. The villa he inherited wasn't simply mortgaged. It had been used to cover gambling debts accumulated over the past 2 years. The lender he owed was not the type to negotiate payment plans. They were the kind that enforced their terms through intimidation and violence. Jennifer had been trying to find a way to help Douglas without enabling him further, Sarah explained. She felt responsible because she had always rescued him before, but this time the amounts were too large and she was running out of time. I found another letter shorter than the others. Robert, I know this is overwhelming, but you need to understand something important. The cabin is not the worthless property Douglas believes it is. The entire coastal area is being rezoned for commercial development. The state is purchasing all the properties to build a marine research center and public park. Sarah's cabin is worth approximately $2.7 million, and the sale is scheduled to close next month. I stared at the figure. $2.7 million. I read it again to be certain. Sarah nodded when she saw my reaction. Jenny arranged it so I would receive $1.7 million, enough to cover my medical care for life. The remaining $1 million goes to you, along with the right to live here until the sale is finalized. Why didn't she just tell me? I asked. Why keep everything secret? Sarah's expression was calm but firm. Because she wanted to make sure Douglas couldn't pressure you into giving him the money. She knew that if you learned about it while she was alive, you would feel obligated to rescue him. This way, the funds are protected. I leaned back, trying to process it all. In a single afternoon, I had learned that my wife had been dying in silence, that I had a stepdaughter with serious medical needs, that my son had become dishonest and reckless, and that I was about to inherit a significant amount of money. What happens now? I asked. Sarah stood carefully, reaching for her crutches. Now we wait for Douglas to realize the villa won't solve his problems. Jenny's lawyer said he probably has 2 weeks before the fraud catches up with him. The lending company is already asking questions. At that moment, my phone rang. Douglas's name appeared. I looked at Sarah, and she nodded. Answer him, but don't tell him anything yet. Jenny wanted you to see how he reacts when he believes you have nothing, I answered. Hello, Douglas. His voice was tense and urgent. Dad, thank God, I need to talk to you. There's a problem with the villa, some paperwork issue. Can you come back to the house? I'm not welcome there, I replied. You gave me 48 hours to leave. Dad, please, this is serious. I think someone is trying to take the inheritance. I need your help. I met Sarah's eyes. She shook her head slightly. I can't help you right now, Douglas. I'm dealing with my own situation. Dad, this affects the whole family, he insisted. The family inheritance is at risk. The inheritance you said I didn't deserve? I answered. The one that left me with nothing but a worthless cabin? There was silence. Then he softened his tone. I didn't mean those things. I was upset about Mom. I believe you meant them, I said, and ended the call. Sarah smiled, and for the first time since arriving, I did too. How long until he realizes the seriousness of his situation? I asked. Jenny estimated 2 days, Sarah said. That's when the payments come due and excuses stop working. I returned to the letters. There were many more, and I sensed the full story was still unfolding. But for the first time in months, I wasn't anxious about what was ahead. 3 days later, I sat with Sarah on the small back porch, watching the sun rise over the water. She had been explaining Jennifer's daily routine here, the quiet structure of her life. It became clear that my wife had found more peace in this modest cabin than she ever had in our suburban home. She used to sit right here every morning, Sarah said, adjusting herself in the reinforced chair. She'd drink coffee and read medical journals she brought from your house. She was researching my condition, looking for treatment options. I drank from one of Jennifer's mismatched mugs. Every part of the cabin reflected a side of her I had never fully understood. Meanwhile, my phone had been vibrating repeatedly. Douglas again. I had been ignoring the calls, but they were becoming more frequent. Jennifer's timeline was accurate. You should probably answer, Sarah said gently. She wanted you to hear how desperate he becomes. I checked the screen, 15 missed calls since the previous day, and answered. Dad, where are you? Douglas sounded frantic. I've been calling for days. I've been occupied, I replied. Dad, I'm in serious trouble. The bank says there's an issue with the villa loan, and a company called Apex Financial claims I owe them money I never borrowed. I looked at Sarah. She nodded slightly. How much money? I asked. $850,000, he said. They claim I signed something, but I didn't. Someone must have forged my signature. The contradiction was obvious. Douglas, who had forged signatures for months, was now claiming the same had been done to him. That's a large amount, I said. I know. That's why I need your help. We need a lawyer. They're threatening to take the villa. And without it, you have nothing, I said. Dad, please, I'm your son. I paused, watching a pelican dive offshore. When you forced me out of my home, did you feel like my son then? He tried to justify it as grief, but I remained calm. You said what you truly believed, I told him. He continued, his voice tightening. They're also talking about criminal charges if I don't pay. For what? There was a pause. They're saying I committed fraud when I applied for the loan. They claim Mom co-signed. Jennifer had been right about everything. I'm not coming back, I told him when he asked me to return and review documents. I'm staying at the cabin. He reacted with disbelief. That place is a dump. It has everything I need, I said. He argued that I should fight for what was ours. What belongs to me, I replied, is what your mother left me. In frustration, he repeated something cruel, that Jennifer had given me the cabin out of pity because I had never accomplished much. The comment no longer had the impact it once would have. I knew the truth about why she had chosen this place. That's interesting, I said calmly, because the documents here suggest she had a very different opinion. When I mentioned financial and medical records, his tone shifted to concern. I chose my words carefully. You have more urgent matters to deal with. Finally, he admitted the source of the pressure. Apex Financial was not a traditional lender. He had turned to private financing because he couldn't qualify elsewhere. He had expected to sell the villa quickly to cover the debt. When pressed further, he admitted additional gambling losses, about $200,000. I can't help you, I told him. He protested, reminding me I was his father. I'm your father when you need money, I said, but when you forced me out, I was just someone who had never achieved anything. He insisted the loan wasn't his fault, claiming forgery again. I looked at Sarah, who nodded. I've seen the documents, I told him. That is your signature. Silence followed. Then he asked how I could know. Your mother hired a private investigator before she died, like she knew about the forged withdrawals from my retirement and savings. She knew about your plan to sell the villa to cover gambling debts. She knew everything. He tried to explain, but I stopped him. There is no explanation for stealing from your father and committing fraud using your mother's name. His voice finally broke. Dad, I'm scared. These people aren't just threatening the property. What are they threatening? I asked. After a long pause, he answered quietly, they're talking about making me disappear. For the first time in our conversation, I felt a small sense of sympathy for my son. He was frightened, and despite everything he had done, he was still the boy I had raised. But Jennifer's letters had prepared me for this moment as well. Douglas, your mother left instructions for this exact situation. What instructions? Come to the cabin tonight. Come alone, and come ready to tell the truth about everything. If you do that, there may be a way to help you, but if you lie to me again, if you try to manipulate or threaten me, you'll be on your own. Dad, thank you, thank God, thank you. Don't thank me yet. Just come here. And Douglas? Yes? Bring the original loan documents, all of them. I hung up and turned to Sarah, who was watching me with Jennifer's same steady look. Do you think he'll actually come? She asked. Oh, he'll come. And when he does, he's going to learn how much his mother truly knew about him. Douglas arrived shortly after sunset, his BMW looking completely out of place on the sandy road. I watched from the kitchen window as he sat in the car for several minutes, likely trying to gather courage or plan his next explanation. Sarah had gone to her bedroom to give us privacy, but I knew she was listening. This conversation would affect her future as much as mine. When Douglas finally knocked, I let him wait. Jennifer's final letter had been very clear about this moment. Let him sit, she had written. Let him understand he depends on your decision. I opened the door to find my son looking like he hadn't slept in days. His normally perfect hair was messy, his expensive shirt wrinkled, and dark circles sat under his eyes. For a brief moment, he looked like the frightened child who once came to our room during storms. Dad. He stepped inside, looking around the cabin with poorly hidden discomfort. This place is smaller than I expected. It has everything I need. His attention moved to the photo album on the coffee table, still open to pictures of Jennifer and Sarah. Who's that woman with Mom? Someone your mother cared about very much. Douglas picked up a photo and studied it. I've never seen her before. When was this taken? Sit down, Douglas. We have a lot to discuss. He sat across from me, holding a manila folder against his chest like protection. Dad, I brought the loan documents like you asked, but I want you to know I had nothing to do with whatever Mom signed. I was as surprised as anyone when the bank said she co-signed. I opened Jennifer's wooden box and took out the investigator's report. Let's start with something simpler. My retirement account. Can you explain these withdrawals? I slid the bank statements across the table. Douglas's face went pale as he recognized his forged signatures. I can explain that. I'm listening. He ran a hand through his hair, the same gesture he used as a child when caught lying. I borrowed some money. I was going to pay it back. $70,000? You plan to repay $70,000 that you took from your father's retirement savings? I didn't steal it. I borrowed it. Without permission, using forged signatures. That's theft, Douglas. His face turned red. You wouldn't have given it to me if I'd asked. You're right. Because I knew you would gamble it away. He stopped himself, realizing what he had confirmed. How did I know about your gambling problem? Your mother hired a very thorough investigator. Would you like to see the photos of you at the casino? The ones from last month when you were supposed to be planning her funeral? Douglas leaned forward, his head in his hands. Dad, I'm sick. Gambling addiction is a real illness. I know it is. But using it to justify stealing from your family isn't treatment. It's enabling. I wanted help. I was going to get help. When? After everything was gone? He looked up with tears, and for a moment I felt the old pull of a father's instinct to protect. But Jennifer's letters had warned me about this as well. He'll cry. He'll say he's sick and sorry. Don't let him manipulate you. Tell me about the villa loan, I said. Douglas wiped his eyes and opened the folder. It's a misunderstanding. Someone forged Mom's signature. I never asked her to guarantee anything. I placed the investigator's photos on the table. Clear images of Douglas at a Miami bank, signing documents and presenting identification for both himself and Jennifer. This is you at First National Bank 3 months ago, I said. He stared at the images, speechless. The bank teller remembers you. You told her your mother was too ill to travel, but that you had power of attorney. That's not. I never said that. Douglas, stop lying. Your mother is gone. I'm the only family you have who might still help you, and you're still lying. Something in my voice reached him. His shoulders dropped. I needed the money, he whispered. The people I owed weren't going to wait. They said they'd hurt me. So you chose to hurt your mother instead. She was dying anyway. The words shocked us both. The cancer was back. The doctor said she had maybe 6 months. I thought there was no point saving money for a future she wouldn't see. I felt a chill. You knew about the cancer? Of course. I saw the medical bills. And you used that to justify what you did. I didn't steal from her. I used her credit to get a loan I couldn't qualify for. I planned to pay it back before she died. With what money? From the villa. It should have been worth at least $1.2 million. I finally understood the full extent of his thinking. He had planned to sell his mother's favorite place to cover his debts. But the villa isn't worth that now, is it? His expression collapsed. The market crashed. There's an environmental problem with the water. It's barely worth $400,000. So you're short about $450,000, plus interest and penalties. The lender is charging 30%. The total came close to 1.1 million, owed to people known for impatience. What's your plan? That's why I'm here. Dad, I know I made mistakes, but they'll kill me if I don't pay. We need to work together, combine resources, maybe take a loan against the house I inherited. I almost laughed. The house you asked me to leave? Dad, please. This is life and death. It certainly is. I took Jennifer's final letter from the wooden box. Your mother had thoughts about this. What do you mean? She wrote this 2 weeks before she died, after learning everything. Would you like me to read it? He nodded, pale. My dearest Robert, I began. By the time you read this, Douglas will be desperate. The loan will be overdue. The villa will have lost its value. He'll come asking for help. He'll cry. He'll promise to change. Don't believe him. Douglas reacted sharply. She also wrote, Douglas has been taking money from us for over 2 years. Not only the recent thefts, but smaller amounts since his gambling began. The total is about $130,000. That's not true, he whispered. I placed another folder on the table. Bank records from 3 years. Jennifer had marked every suspicious withdrawal. $137,426. She was close. Douglas stared at the papers, breathing unevenly. But this hurt her the most. I continued. Last month, Douglas said he wished I would hurry up and die so he could inherit everything. He said caring for a sick woman was inconvenient for his lifestyle. I never said that. You said it in the hospital parking lot. She heard you. The room went quiet, except for the sound of the waves and his unsteady breathing. Your mother spent her final weeks making sure you couldn't destroy what remained of this family, and she made plans for what comes next. What kind of plans? I looked toward the bedroom where Sarah was listening. This was the moment Jennifer had prepared. The kind that may save your life, I said, but only if you accept the consequences of your actions. Douglas looked up, hopeful and desperate. What do I need to do? First, you're going to meet someone. Someone your mother loved deeply, someone she cared for in her final years. I called out, Sarah, could you come in, please? The bedroom door opened, and Sarah came out on her crutches. Douglas watched her approach, confused. Douglas, I said, meet your sister. The shock on his face was complete. His mouth opened as he looked between Sarah and me, trying to understand what he was seeing. That's impossible, he said at last. Mom never had another child. Sarah sat carefully in the chair beside me. Yes, she did. She had me when she was 17, and she gave me up for adoption because her parents threatened to cut her off if she kept me. Douglas shook his head quickly. No, that's not true. Mom would have told me. Would she? I asked. The same way she told you the cancer had returned? The same way you told her about your gambling debts? Sarah spoke calmly. Your mother found me 2 years before she got sick. She had been searching for decades. When she learned about my medical condition, she decided to help me. Medical condition? I have muscular dystrophy. It's progressive and treatment is expensive. Your mother used her inheritance from her grandmother to buy this cabin and help cover my medical costs. Douglas's expression moved through disbelief, frustration, and then calculation. I could see him trying to assess what this meant for him. So this cabin, it belongs to her? It belongs to both of us now, Sarah said. Your mother left it to us jointly. But it's worthless. Dad said it was worthless. Sarah and I exchanged a brief look. This was the point Jennifer had planned. Actually, I said, your mother was mistaken about one thing in her letters. The cabin isn't worth $2.7 million. Douglas's face dropped. It's worth $3.4 million. The state increased their offer last week. The silence that followed was heavy. Douglas stared at me, clearly trying to understand what that number meant for his situation. $3.4 million, he repeated slowly. For this cabin? For this property, Sarah corrected gently. The state needs the entire land for a marine research facility. The cabin itself will be removed. I watched as hope appeared in his eyes, followed quickly by calculation. So we split it 3 ways, he asked. That's still over $1 million each. No, I said firmly. We don't split it 3 ways. His expression fell again. But, Dad, I'm family too. You are, I said. And that's why your mother made specific arrangements for you. I took a thick legal document from the wooden box. This is your mother's final provision for you, a way out of the situation you created. Douglas took the document with shaking hands. As he read, his expression moved from hope to confusion, then to cautious relief. She paid my debts? Not exactly. She arranged for them to be paid with conditions. Sarah leaned forward. Your mother liquidated her life insurance policy, her jewelry, and personal investments. She raised exactly $1.1 million. That's enough to cover everything I owe. Yes, I said, but the money doesn't go to you. It goes into a trust managed by her lawyer. Your creditors will be paid directly. You won't receive any of it. Douglas looked up. What about the rest? What about my share from the property sale? I glanced at Sarah. This was the most difficult part, but it was exactly what Jennifer had decided. You don't receive any share, I said. Sarah receives $2 million to secure her lifelong medical care. I receive $1.4 million. And me? You receive nothing. His voice broke. You receive your life, Sarah said quietly. Your mother saved your life, Douglas. The people you owe don't forgive debts. Without her plan, you likely wouldn't survive the next month. Douglas leaned forward, the document slipping from his hands. So I lose everything. The villa, the house, the inheritance. Not everything, I said. You get the chance to keep living. That's more than your actions deserved. For several minutes, no one spoke. Outside, the waves moved steadily and seabirds called in the fading light. Douglas sat with his head in his hands, beginning to understand the full consequences of his choices. There is one more condition, I said. He looked up carefully. Your mother also arranged for you to enter a residential gambling treatment program in Colorado. If you complete it and show real progress, the trust will provide a small monthly allowance, enough to live modestly, but not enough to support gambling. For how long? For as long as you remain clean. One relapse, and the allowance ends permanently. Douglas wiped his eyes. What if I refuse? Then the debts won't be paid, and you deal with your creditors yourself. The decision is yours. He sat quietly, looking out toward the water. When he spoke again, his voice was low. I really hurt her, didn't I? Sarah nodded gently. She cried during those last weeks. Not because of the cancer, because she was heartbroken. She loved you, but she couldn't watch you destroy yourself or your father. She used to talk about you as a child, I added. Your first steps, your first words, the way you brought her dandelions and called them flowers. She never stopped loving you, but she had to stop enabling you. Douglas began to cry. I'm sorry, Dad, for everything, for what I said and how I treated you. I was scared and desperate. I remained seated. Being sorry doesn't repair the damage. Forgiveness comes from actions, not words. He nodded. When does the program start? Next Monday. A car will pick you up from the house. You have the weekend to pack. The house will be sold immediately. Any remaining proceeds go toward creditors and legal costs. You won't receive any of it. He accepted this quietly, as if the collapse of his old life brought a strange sense of clarity. Will I be able to stay in touch with you? I looked at Sarah, who nodded. If you complete treatment and remain clean, yes. But this is your last chance. Your mother was the only one who repeatedly rescued you. I won't do that. If you relapse, manipulate, or steal again, you're on your own. I understand. I need you to truly understand what she did for you. She spent her final months researching treatment, selling assets, and building this plan to save your life. Sarah added, she also wanted you to know about me. She hoped that someday, when you were healthy, we could become a real family. Douglas looked at his half-sister. I have many questions. I have answers, Sarah said, but only after you're clean. I promised your mother I wouldn't enable your addiction. As the evening continued, his shock turned into quiet acceptance. We discussed the practical details, treatment, legal matters, and what would happen to his belongings. It felt like dismantling one life in order to give him a chance at another. Around midnight, Douglas stood to leave. At the door, he turned back. Dad, the things I said, that Mom thought you were a failure, they weren't true. I said them because I was angry and scared. I know, I said. Your mother's letters made her feelings very clear. He nodded, emotional again. Will you visit me? If you complete the program, yes. And after that? I looked at Sarah. One step at a time, Douglas. Show real change, and we'll see what kind of relationship is possible. After he left, Sarah and I sat on the porch, listening to the waves. Do you think he'll stay in treatment? She asked. I don't know. Your mother believed he would. She believed the good in him was still there. 3 months later, I stood in the same place where I had first met Sarah, but everything had changed. The state purchased the property and gave us 60 days to relocate. Sarah found an accessible home inland near her doctor's. I bought a small house just 2 blocks away. The sale changed our lives. Sarah's trust covered her medical needs and gave her long-term security. My portion allowed me to retire comfortably and consider the travel Jennifer and I had always discussed. Douglas remained in treatment. Weekly reports showed slow but steady progress. He completed the first phase and moved into independent living within the facility, working in the kitchen. Sarah began online college courses in social work. She wanted to help others navigate the medical and financial systems that had once overwhelmed her. As for me, I was learning how to live again. The constant worry, the weight of family conflict, and the loneliness had lifted. I had a daughter who valued my presence and a future that finally felt my own. One afternoon, the treatment center called. Mr. Holloway, Douglas has completed phase 2. He'd like to speak with you if you're willing. I agreed. When his voice came on the line, it sounded calmer and more thoughtful. Hi, Dad. Hello, son. I want to thank you for giving me this chance. Your mother deserves the credit. I think about her every day, how I hurt her and wasted the time I had. After a pause, he continued. I know I can't undo what I did, but I'm different now. I understand what I lost. What did you lose? My family, your respect, Mom's trust, the chance to be a better son and brother. Those things can be rebuilt, I said, if you do the work. I will. We talked for 20 minutes, the most honest conversation we had shared in years. When the call ended, I felt something I hadn't felt about Douglas in a long time. Cautious hope. That evening, Sarah and I had dinner on her new porch. She had prepared Jennifer's seafood pasta using handwritten notes. Do you miss her? She asked. Every day. But I'm grateful too. For what? For understanding who she truly was. For what she did for all of us. And for meeting you. Sarah smiled, and in that moment she reminded me strongly of Jennifer. She would be proud of how things turned out, she said. Jennifer's final act had done 3 things: saved her son's life, protected her husband's future, and secured her daughter's care. She had taken a broken family and created the possibility for healing. It wasn't the life I expected, but it was the one we needed. And for the first time in years, I felt that I was exactly where I belonged.